And taking some time to consider when I and me and you and myself and what would I like to have happen? And what would me like to have happen? And what would you like to have happen? And what would myself like to have happen? And what would your name like to have happen? When all of that, what do you know now about your outcome? And how would you restate it now, knowing all of that? Take some time to formulate what you know now and to represent that either on this paper or on a new sheet of paper. What would you like to have happen? These maps, sacred artifacts. And I think they almost need to be treated with even more care and carefulness than words sometimes. And for some people, they're not that significant. In the same way that for some people, the words really aren't that important. But for others, there's an awful lot of information contained in a map. And when I was first starting this work, the only people who knew about David Grove were other therapists. And so you were often working with therapists and all of their disciplines and the sorts of questions they were allowed to ask from their discipline. And if I just show you my stuff, that's not yours, is it? No, that's not yours, is it? This one. A lot of my stuff was about this. About knowing about my eye. But I had a therapist working with me when I was doing this with David, and I was talking about an eye that, and it was a real sense of it here. She came up to me and she said, "Oh," she said, "you're an enormous vagina." I was absolutely horrified. Partly because the stuff I was dealing with was quite young, my internal eye, and to put a kind of a grown-up's thing on it. And then the reason that she'd said it was because when I was working, it was not just my drawing, which is in fact an eye, obviously.
Unless you're a therapist.
And since it is my model of the world, my interpretation rules. But also because when I was working, I've got a skirt on right now, I work a lot like that. Now, one of the things about that, again, is a lot of my stuff was quite pre-verbal, with very little body awareness. And so I said, "It's not a vagina, it's an eye." And she said, No, it is." She said, you're always talking with your vagina." And I was just like, "Oh, what? And luckily for me, because I could have got quite distressed by this, because it was deep personal stuff I was working through, and I could have got quite, but because Dee was with me, and Dee was very, very funny, and I told this to Dee, and she said, "Oh, that's okay." She said, "My vagina can talk to her as well." And so she spent a lot of things going, "Oh." And then she'd whisper to me. It was very, but Dee took out, but it was a real lesson to me, is she just needed to keep her, you'll hear her vagina off my eye. Because my eye was fine, it didn't need her vaginas on it. Do you know, it is really not necessary. And it's just the same with other people's stuff, is not to go, that's a great, that looks, that's a bit, none of that stuff. You do not know what it means, you do not know what it represents, and you don't know how potent or just descriptive it is, you just don't know. And I think this is a great lesson for anyone dealing with children's drawings. You know, you learn these skills this way. But take a few moments and just if you want to share what's on your picture and in your mapping, and just find somebody else to share with, and just find out a little bit about theirs, tell them a little bit about yours, a bit of show and tell about your pronoun-scapes. I think a lot of David's work, certainly towards the end of his life, was, I don't suppose he thought it was the end of his life, but certainly what he was doing towards the end of his life was not getting involved in things that were going to take, he'd call it the blood and guts of stuff, where it takes you ages and ages to go and try and sort something only to find out, you know, actually that's not what everyone wanted. A lot of his stuff, his systemic stuff was, if you go into the pronoun-scapes, often you don't ever, it's very, very rare that you deal with the same outcome that they arrived with. And that whole thing took 20 minutes. It's not a very long time to just check out some stuff. And to do that before you start, then you can work on whatever the new outcome was, as opposed to working on one bit where a different part of it sabotages it. Sometimes they're not relevant. Sometimes people go, what? I don't know what? No idea what you're talking about. In which case, do something else. But I just wanted to leave you with, well, a little nugget also, because I know Gary kind of was interested in it. And I never get a chance, talking to Gilda, I don't get a chance. And it's one of the things about when somebody dies who's so brilliant and who never wrote anything. And it's one of the reasons I'm so clear that I've got to start writing, because I know loads. I followed that man for years. I know about hieroglyphics, about using the words and the different way that letters come out as a way of investigating your stuff. I know about pronoun-scapes, I know about clean space. We could take each of these pronouns and map them out in space, and you could go and stand in one of them and say, what do you know from this pronoun here? What does your I know about you and me and myself? And then move to another space, and we could build up knowledge like that. I know about lines of sight, about how people dissociate out of their bodies into things and then never go back again. I know loads about planes of bisection, when people become different things, or when the world changes and a child is left in a world which had one set of rules and now the next one grows up in a new world with a new set of rules. How do you get them back? But if I don't write it down and I don't do something about it, I'm going to die too one day. And like David, I don't know when that's going to be. And if I go too, you're left with less and less people who know stuff about this stuff. So I thought, why don't we just do a little bit of something that I don't normally teach, but that I do know about, because it's easy to do. You can replicate it. You can do it over the phone.
You just have a repeat. So you went through I, you, myself, and the person's name.
Yep.
It's on the paper.
So it's. And some people do others. I, me, you, myself, name.
The above are the questions you use?
Where, whereabouts, what kind, anything else, size, shape, how old, what would so-and-so like to have happen? I mean, that's just what I do. I made it up, it's not true. You could use all the clean questions. Where did I come from before I was there? What happens next when there's an I like that? You know, you could, but I think that gets a bit, you're just modelling, and these are the basics. It's basic clean questions, plus the how old, because they often have ages. What would X like to have happen? Very easy formula.